Okay. Well, I'm really pleased today because I've got Nick Rogue of Same Night Seduction here, and we're going to be doing a kick-ass interview because I've got a lot of really interesting questions I want to ask him. And if you haven't heard of Nick, he's been around a long time. You should have. Nick, perhaps you can start off by giving us a little bit of history and background and how you got into this, and just tell us a little bit about who you are, and let's start from there.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, and it's also a where to start. I guess I could start maybe in high school. We'll start all the way back then, even though I'm an old man now. It all kind of began as the guy who was the mascot in high school, the guy who was the student body president in high school, a guy who was genuinely popular in high school, also a guy who couldn't hook up to save his life, the guy that everybody, every girl, just kind of looked at as, this is Mr. Friendzone guy. This is the guy that I complain about all the other men that have mistreated me and have hurt me in the past, or, how can I hook up with this guy? They would come ask me that. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I'm right here and I really like you. What do I do? And this went on for ages. And I can remember going to college still, president of my fraternity. A goddamn fraternity. And still being I was like the Lewis and Clark of the friend zone, discovering new uncharted territories of how far into the friend zone you could be. I remember taking a girl on a 5-day, all expenses paid by me cruise to the Caribbean, and she wouldn't even so much as spoon with me while we were in like a bed that was built for like one person. It was that pathetic. I think I got a warm ass out hug at the end of it, but that was about it. I got fed up with it. I got tired of it. So I, like a lot of people, started looking into some advice on how to, stop being in that damn friend zone. And through a long process of really mostly stuff that just didn't work or overcomplicated the process, I finally figured out that maybe because I was a little bit analytical, I was making things far more complicated than it needed to be. And I think if you're watching this guys right now, maybe you're thinking the same thing, that maybe you've made it a little bit too complicated, and that's what's getting in the way of your results. I know that was what happened to me. So it came down to just really simplifying the process and making it so that I didn't really have to constantly be up in my head thinking about everything at every constant moment, what to do next. She said this, what do I do after that? It was really about simplifying the process, and the more that I simplified it, the less I had to think about it. The less I had to think about it, the easier it got, and that's the way that it should be. So that's kind of where it all began. I don't know where you want me to take it from there, but that's kind of the basis behind it all. And I guess I could safely say that today it's more like popping bottles and dating models. It's become that simple, even for a chubby, fat, bald guy like myself.
Well, what do you think was the key breakthrough? What was, like you talk about it being, it's a lot simpler than perhaps you were making out to be in your mind, but it's I think it's one thing to recognize that, another thing to actually act on it and have the results.
I'm glad that you bring that up, because that's a really important question. Basically, what I wanted and what reality actually is are completely different things. What I wanted, and it's a good thing they are actually, and I'll get to that in a second, but I wanted it to be some simple, straightforward, I do this, she does that, I do this, she does that, I say this, she responds this way. I wanted it to be this linear process that went straight to the bedroom every time. And I think a lot of guys want that. The sad fact is, and actually the fortunate fact, if we look at it properly, is that reality is not like that. Every interaction is in constant flux. It's always changing. There's always obstacles that are getting thrown in the way. And what would throw me off in the past is that I would have this big long script of things that I'm supposed to say to get her in the sack, and she wouldn't remember her goddamn lines. And so I was always constantly, frustrated, because I'm like, oh, now what do I say? She wasn't supposed to say that. She was supposed to say this. I used this quote unquote neg. She's supposed to react like this, but she didn't react like this. She got pissed off and flipped me off and told me to fuck off and walked the other way. That wasn't on the script. She was supposed to be into me. The thing is that I kind of view an interaction a lot like, and maybe this is bad for me to admit, but it's a lot like driving home drunk in Las Vegas, where I'm from, and not really knowing, maybe I'm in a neighborhood, I don't know where I am, and I just need to get back home. So I know that there's the Red Rocks Mountains on the west side, and then there's some ugly brown mountains on the east side of the valley. Then you got the Light of the Luxor kind of in the middle. And I could use those three things to kind of triangulate where I was, and I could always safely guide myself back to my place every time, no matter where in town I was. And if I didn't know exactly the neighborhood, I could just use those as reference points and guide things to where I needed to be, back at my place. And it's the same when it comes to seduction. If you want to be able to safely and securely and effortlessly guide things back to your place, just like I was doing in Las Vegas, you just need to know the signposts and the different things that will get you back on track. Just like the Light of the Luxor and the mountains on the other side, you need something that will make it so that you can make those adjustments when things go off key or when she says something that's not on the script, and she always will.
Because that's interesting, because basically what you're saying is that you recognize, I think, certain demarcation points, which if you just sort of keep on track of them, that then you're going to get in the right direction, and it's going to follow, and you're going to get home.
Mm-hmm.
But I think recognizing what those specific points are is something that I think a lot of guys will have a hard time to do. And also the thing is that because they don't follow a script, it becomes much more of an intellectual process. You're talking. You said it's like as if you're drunk and driving, trying to get home, where your mind is not really that much engaged. I think it's more engaged because you haven't got a roadmap. You've got to kind of know that you're going to do different things or the right things when certain things perhaps don't happen the way you thought they might.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I mean, the way that I kind of look at it is none of us seduction experts, none of us master PUAs or anything, we didn't invent hooking up. We didn't invent banging. It's been something that we have been, as a human species, been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. It's something that's kind of natural within us. We just kind of have lost sight of how it naturally occurs. So guess what? I'm going to give you those 3 reference points that I was kind of alluding to in Las Vegas. There's 3 reference points that you can use to always guide your interactions towards the bedroom. So you don't really have to be thinking about it. You just have to kind of think, all right, I've got this over here, and then I want to get to here. So here's the reference points. How do I take where I currently am and shift it to where I want to be? And I call it the sex system. And it just so happens it's not actually spelled S-E-X. It's a S-E-C system. And if you can do these 3 things, this is where the sex becomes really easily, or it comes to you very easily. So here we go. The first thing that you need to do is take care of the S part of things. And the S is just screening. When any given night that you go out to a bar, to a club, to a social event, heck, a barbecue, even on the street, there's going to be a small amount of women that you can take home that night, and that's really all I ever focus on. I do get numbers for the future, and that's great and all that, but I never, the faster I can make it happen, the more likely it's going to happen. So I tend to focus all of my efforts on trying to hook up the same night I meet a woman, because the quicker it happens, the more likely it's going to happen. The longer the time goes between the first meet to the hooking up, the less likely the hooking up happens. So I really want to focus my time on the ones that could actually go home with me, and there are not that many people or women that are going to fit into that category. The worst thing that I can think of, some people might think the worst thing that you can go out and do is go to a bar, club, and not talk to a single person the entire night. To me, what's even worse than that is going and talking to one single person that one person that couldn't go home with you even if they wanted to, because you just wasted your damn time. You wasted your entire night when you could have been out mingling, talking. I mean, you were talking to one person. Why not talk to somebody who could go home with you? So you really want to do the first in the sex system. S is screen. Screen for those who are able to go home with you that night, and focus your effort on them. If you can do that, you're going to be in front of the people that are actually able to logistically go home with you. And I might get into more on how to figure that out, and you can do it really quickly in under 5 minutes in a minute, but I kind of wanted to talk about the other things first. The next one is E. E is escalation. Once you've found somebody that you can take home that night, you want to escalate like crazy. In fact, not only do you want to escalate like crazy, you want to bait her into escalating on you like crazy. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that, where it's a mutual process of you escalating, she's escalating. And if you can do it as a mutual thing and not just as you trying to push something up the hill, kind of like Sisyphus trying to push a rock up the hill that always seems to roll back down right when he's almost reached his goal. Well, that kind of goes away when she's escalating on you just as hard as you're escalating on her. And there's a lot of tricks that we can get into, if you'd like, later on how to make that happen, where we can escalate mutually, because that's when it happens really quickly. I think most guys go out with the mindset that they've got to do all the escalation, and the girl kind of sits back, and no wonder the results are spotty, and no wonder it takes a long time, and no wonder they have to go on a string of 6 dates before they get to first base. It's because they're doing all the work and not allowing her to do some of the work for them. Then finally, the C. C is just closing. Closing the damn deal. You've got her turned on. You've got her excited. You've talking to a girl that you could go home with. It blows my mind how many times I see a guy that's got everything together and then just fails to pull the damn trigger. Fails to just grab her by the hand, grab his balls, and get her the fuck out of there so that they can get to the banging. So that's basically all it comes down to, is those 3 things. And if you could just keep those 3 things, a few tools on how to do those few things, you are basically game over. It's really not any more complicated than that.
Well, that sounds like a nice, simple system. Let's go a little bit into detail on this. I know I've watched, I think you have a YouTube video out on screening with your 5 questions,
Yes.
which I thought was, obvious yet brilliant.
Mm.
And I definitely wouldn't mind you sort of going over that here and letting people hear it from you, especially particularly with perhaps some insights into that you may have picked up, the more you've used it and the more you've gotten experience with it.
Yeah, and in fact, let me tell you a little something about the history of the questions. It was kind of something that came about as necessity. Like I said, I'm from Las Vegas. I meet a girl. Odds are, she's getting on a plane to Des Moines, Iowa the next day. I've got to make things happen fast. Otherwise, it's not going to happen at all. Sure, if you're living in a normal city, you're going to meet girls that are still going to be around, the next week. But I didn't have that luxury as often. So I really had to find a way to figure this out quickly, efficiently, so that I was spending my time in the right women. Now, there are some variations that you'll want to do in Las Vegas that are a little bit different, but we'll get into just what you would need to know in most cities, most scenarios. Assuming you live in any normal city. I guess Las Vegas is kind of in a world of its own. Another clarification that I want to make is that the questions are training wheels. You can ask all of these as questions, and it'll work just fine. It is kind of the training wheels method, because I rarely ask the questions directly these days. I might sometimes ask some of them, but overall, if you pay attention, a lot of the times they'll offer up the information, or you can make statements that will elicit that information, and it's a much more sophisticated way to do this rather than going into full-on interrogation mode. But here's the 5 questions that you really need in order to figure out if this girl's DTF, if this girl's a girl that you can take home that night. Here we go. Question number 1, question number 2, they're kind of interrelated. Who are you here with? How did you get here? Why do we need to know this? We need to know this because we need to know what the situation is. Is she there with her boyfriend? Is she there with her cousin? Is she there with a bunch of people that she doesn't even know? She just met him out on the street and, you know, is by herself and she could leave at any time. Is she there alone? Hey, maybe she is. You know, sometimes if you do find a girl, ding, 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 you've got a winner. Go for her, escalate like crazy, because that's about as likely as you're going to get. But you need to know the situation. If she's there with her boyfriend's sister, I'm not saying that you should go for girls that have boyfriends, but I'm no stranger to doing it. You need to know who's going to be judging her, basically. So, who's she there with? How do they know each other? That's going to kind of paint a picture of what your likelihood is. Now let's go on to the next one. The next one is you really want to know how she's getting home at the end of the night, but that's really a creepy question to ask. So the way that you get around that is just how did you get here, and that will usually give you the same information. How did you get here tonight? I even go so far so I don't have to ask a creepy question. Is let me guess, all of you guys came here in the same Volkswagen Beetle. You climbed in, all 12 of you, and almost like circus clowns pulled up out, and they're like, no, 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 I took the metro, or I took the subway, or something like that. You're looking for a girl that drove herself, preferably. You don't want the girl that is responsible for all of the other girls. She's driving that night, and there's 5 other girls in her minivan that she's got to take home at the end of the night, because at the end of the night, the best you can hope for with this girl is that she's going to go drop off all of her friends and then come over to your place. Could happen, but it's not very likely. So you're looking for the least friction that you can have about her getting home. Now, finally, or not finally, the fourth question, this is one I really love, because this is where you're kind of hinting at sexuality without actually being very overt about it. Because when we get into escalation, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, the quicker you could start setting that sexual mindset, getting her thinking about you in a sexual light, the easier it is for the seduction just to flow naturally to the bedroom. The next question is really the most suave, sophisticated, and classy way to ask her, do you want to fuck later? And here it is. It sounds like it has nothing to do with that, but the question is, what are your plans for later? Or what's on the agenda for later, or anything like that. But what are your plans for later? Now, don't believe me? Think about it this way. If a girl ever asked you that, what is she really asking you? Does she really care what you're doing later on that night? No. She wants to know if she can hook up with you later that night. So this is a really, really important question. And ask any of your girlfriends if they're being really honest. If she asked a guy that, what does she really mean? She'll confirm exactly what I just said. Then finally, you want to know what time she has to get up in the morning. You know, maybe she has to work in the morning. Maybe she's got some crazy job that gets her up at 4 o'clock in the morning. The later that she has to get up the next day, the better. No woman's going to lose her job over hookup, or maybe she'll call in sick or anything like that if you get her really turned on. But the later the better. So it's probably the least important, but it's still something that's going to play a factor in all of this. And when you combine all of those things by either just paying attention to what she's saying, by asking them outright, or saying statements that might elicit that information, you can figure this out within 2 to 5 minutes. Who's your good candidates and who's wasting your time? If they're not a good candidate and you like them still, get their number, move on. Staying and talking to them for another half hour is probably not going to increase the likelihood that she's going to go on a date with you later. In fact, it might actually kill it, because some of the intrigue and the mystery is gone if you sit there and blab with her a little bit longer. Plus, that's time that you could be using to find a girl that you actually could take home. So it's kind of a double whammy. Get her number, move on. Once you do find those girls, well, we can get into that later, what to do.
Well, yeah, now that you, okay, so now you've screened her and you've got someone who's a likely candidate.
Hmm.
What's the next step? How do you lead into the escalation? What do you do next?
Okay, this is great. I'm glad you asked this because it's kind of a mixed thing. I always start the interaction not only with screening but also with escalation. And what I mean by that is rather than some of the traditional methods of seduction, pickup, all of that, where they want to get the girl attracted first, build some comfort first, I always start with seduction. I skip all of that other stuff. Maybe it's because I have to. I'm not that good looking. I'm not good looking enough that I can attract a girl in the first place. So I'm going to have to start by getting her sexually excited as quickly as possible. And so within the first couple minutes, I want to get her thinking about sex, and not only thinking about sex, thinking about the crazy sex her and I are going to be having later. Now, there is an art to doing this properly, because if you're just the overtly uh, upfront sexual dude right off the bat, right in front of her friends, all you're going to do is get resistance, because she's going to feel judged by her friends. Because if she leaves with you, her friends are going to know what happened. They're going to know, and they're going to judge her. She's going to feel like a slut, so she just will put up her barrier. So there's basically an idea of implicit framing and explicit framing. There's flirtatious frames and there's sexual frames, and it's all about using them in the proper order. I like to start using the flirtatious frames from the very get-go. And the funny thing is that I use a lot of those same flirtatious frames, not just on the girl that I'm after. And one other thing, I never know who I'm actually after until after I've approached a group. Never go in with the mindset, and I know that this is kind of classical game where you decide who your target's going to be before you even talk to the group or you even approach them. That's ridiculous. You don't know who's going to be the best logistical candidate in that group until you start interacting with them. You don't know who's going to be the most fun until you start interacting with them. You don't know that one girl's got a boyfriend that's in the bathroom, or if one girl's the Bachelorette or something like that. You don't know any of that until you go and approach. Go and approach, figure that out, then figure out who is going to be the one that you're going to be going after. Because one thing I've noticed, uh, girls who are attractive also tended to hang out with other attractive women. So it would be really kind of ridiculous for you to make that decision before approaching. That's all kind of a side note to saying that I flirt with just about every one of the girls right off the get-go. I want to be known as that flirtatious guy, the guy that can't help himself. Like that guy, the Don Draper, or the who's the guy from Nip Tuck? That guy, the guy who just is a flirt and he can't fucking help himself. I want to be that guy. I want to get in on their good side. Why? Because later on, those girls, if I've been cool with them, if I've acknowledged them, if I've kind of flirted, been friendly with them, they can either be my biggest allies in me hooking up with their friend, or my biggest enemies. They could be the worst cockblocks. And most guys will set everything up so that at the end of the night, those girls are pulling their friend the fuck away from you. And you know what? As men, we think, oh, what a fucking cockblock. These girls are actually doing the right thing 99% of the time. Why? Because you weren't socially savvy enough to treat them right from the get-go. If you treat them as friends, if you treat them as, this is, as an actual human being and not as an obstacle, they're not going to be an obstacle later on. So I start off with just lightly flirting with everyone. Now, as I am able to move the girl away from the group, and usually the first time I move her away, I get the group's permission. I'll say, listen, Sally and I like each other. Do you mind if we walk 10 feet over there and had a little conversation? I mean, you're welcome to come, but we're going to go check this out over here. I want to show her something. Now, if you've been cool to the friends, they'll have no problem with it. So, yeah, go right ahead. Once you get them out of eyesight, earshot, that's when you can start really doing some serious escalation. That's when you can get into the down and dirty. You can get into the more sexual flirtation. And once you start doing that, it's kind of like rather than I brought up Sisyphus pushing the rock up the mountain, it's kind of like that snowball that just starts rolling down the hill until it's this giant boulder of a snowball at the bottom of the hill. It becomes that easy and that effortless because you're both working at the escalation. You're both thinking the same things. You're both moving in the same path. I don't know if any of that makes sense or if I'm talking a little bit high levels right now.
No, no, it's good. I think I think I'd like to get a little more specifics on how you actually do the escalation. You know, you mentioned getting more sexual, but uh, I think it's important to understand how you break that from the non-sexual into the sexual.
That's a good question, and I'm going to answer it in a kind of weird way. I think most people think of escalation as one thing that you do to a girl. It's one set of strategy. It's one strategy that takes her from, you know, just some girl that you don't know into some girl that is ready to fumble at your belt buckle to rip your pants off. And really, there's a lot of different ways to get at the same goal. There's a lot of different tools that you can use to escalate. Escalation is not just one thing. It's a whole toolbox of different things that you can use. The beautiful thing is you don't have to be a master at all of them. I mean, in my system, I have about 13 different ways to sexually escalate on a woman. And honestly, you don't need to be a master of every one of those to get laid. In fact, if you're good at one or two of them, that's more than enough. Being mastering more of them just gives you more options, gives you more consistency. It gives you more things that you can do to shift gears. If you ever hit a wall with one type of escalation, you could just shift gears into a different type of escalation. I'm trying to think of which tool I'd most like to share right now, because like I said, we could go on for hours and hours talking about the 13 different ways to do this. I think one of the easiest ways to do this is to talk a little bit about sexual framing. I won't go too heavy into it because there's a lot of stuff out there on it, and honestly, I can teach a lot about just that. I could spend an hour teaching just sexual framing and how to do it, but it's really actually quite simple. Sexual framing is basically just the lens through which she sees the interaction. It's how she perceives when she's, you know, taking a step back mentally and picturing you and her. How does she frame that? Does she frame that in, you know, this guy's over in Friendland, or is this guy over in Fuckland? Hopefully you're in Fuckland because that's a happy place, but it has to do with how you frame the interaction. People are very susceptible to how you frame it in the first part, or in the first place. And basically this was the big problem that I had early on in my pathetic attempts to woo women over when I was the student body president of a high school, and still every girl thought I was just friend material. Why? Well, I framed every interaction as me being the friendly guy rather than me being the fuck guy. So you need to instantly, because the thing about frames is they grow exponentially over time. The sooner that you can get yourself into a sexual frame so she views you as a potential sexual partner, the more that's going to grow over time. It grows exponentially. The more that she views you as a friend, well, that sadly grows exponentially over time as well. That's why if you're ever finding yourself in the friend zone, you find it impossible to get out of the friend zone, it's because it is fucking impossible to get out of the friend zone. She's viewed you in that friend frame for so damn long that it's impossible for her to view you any other way. That same magic, though, can work in your favor when you start sexually framing. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm going to give you my favorite right now. My favorite's just this one line that I'll say early in the interaction, any given interaction. It's something that you could say in front of her friends if you want to. It's something that I usually like to kind of pull her aside, put my hand up to her ear like this, and just say, you know what? You look like a seriously nice girl, but I detect a naughty side. And if I say that to a girl, now listen, I don't care who the girl is, every girl Mother Teresa has a naughty side. Here's something disgusting and that's going to disturb everybody and probably give them nightmares for ages. Your grandma, your dear sweet grandma, has a naughty side. How do I know? Because you're listening to this right now. My grandma did too. I'm here flapping my gums about all of this stuff. She had a naughty side. Every girl has it. You just need to give her that permission to express that side. And by using this line, it gives her that permission. Now, you're going to get a couple of different responses. Some will just giggle and like knowingly nod. Some will like, no, I'm a good girl. To which I'll always reply, you know what I've noticed? Every good girl says she's a bad girl, and every bad girl says she's a good girl. So I know what kind of girl you really are. Just pushes that frame right back on them. She giggles. She knows. Now she has the permission to start acting on that naughty side. And you're going to find her acting more and more and increasingly more naughty around you the more that the interaction progresses. Because like I said, frames a lot of the time are one of those things like the rom papil thing. You set it, then forget it. Once you've set a very strong sexual frame from the early part of the interaction, you can actually sit back and talk about puppy dogs, rainbows, and ice cream cones, and that implicit frame is still a sexual one. It's kind of funny how you could try it the other way around and set a friend frame and then try to talk about sex and all that, and all she'll do is think about that guy that she's really after or the ex-boyfriend that broke her heart. Get it in the wrong order, set the friend frame first, and talk about sex. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Set the sexual frame first, then talk about friend type stuff. Completely different reaction. Strange how that works, but it's very powerful. Be aware of that in every interaction. Start the interaction in seduction.
Very interesting. Now I guess we're going to move on to closing and see how you take that from having just sort of tweaked her by telling her that she's a naughty girl, and you've got her logistics, and now how do you take her home, basically?
I love this question, and it's actually a far more simple than you think. I basically have two questions that I ask myself mentally. Just two questions. And these two questions let me know, can I take her home or not? And the first question is, could she go home with me if she wanted to? If the answer is yes, ding, 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 okay, let's go on to the next one. Do I have her at least somewhat sexually turned on? And I don't mean she has to be dripping through her panties. Is she somewhat turned on? And then basically, and actually I kind of messed up the first question, can I get her to a place where sex is realistically possible? It's just those two questions. Turned on, place where sex is realistically possible. Usually that's going to be your place. Hopefully you have your place set up so that you can hook up with her there. If not, you're really putting yourself in a disadvantage. And what I mean by that is if you live on an air mattress in your mom's basement, you're kind of already fucking yourself, literally fucking yourself. That's what you're going to be doing because you don't have a place to take the girl. There's ways to get around it, but you need to have a place where sex is realistically possible. And yes, this does depend on the girl. Some girls, it's realistically possible to take her into the bathroom. To me, that's goddamn disgusting. And the last place I'm gonna feel sexy is a place where there's pee on the floor and pubes. But for some girls, that might be realistically possible. Not most girls. What's gonna be realistically possible is your place. Now, let's think about your place. Is it set up? Is it ready? Is it ready for you to bring a girl? This is kind of one of those. I don't believe a lot in inner game. I think seduction is more of a skill rather than a set of confident beliefs or whatever. But it really does hurt a man's mindset if he wants to bring a girl home that he just met that night and bang the shit out of her, but weighing on the back of his mind is that he's got beer cans strewn about the house, he's got pubes around the toilet seat, maybe he's shaved and has like beard trimmings all over the sink, he's got pizza boxes in the living room, and his dirty undies on his bed. It's going to kind of weigh on him, and when he's thinking, yeah, I could pull her back, but I've got all this disgusting stuff. So it's one of those psychological blocks that keeps him from making the pull in the first place. Have your shit in order. Have your place tidy. I mean, I almost feel like this is like getting laid 101, but it amazes me how many guys are not, doing just the basic things. Have your place ready to hook up. Is your place clean? Good, check. Do you have condoms? And I hide them all throughout the house because I never know where it's going to happen. And I've got a 3-story penthouse here with many, many rooms, so it could happen, in the kitchen. It could happen in my study. It could happen in one of my many bedrooms. Do I have a condom hidden somewhere in that room? Just because I never know where it's going to happen. I even have one hidden on my goddamn balcony, just in case. In case you're wondering, it's in the. I've got a light. I just kind of pull the light back. There it is. It's kind of taped right there, just in case the sex begins on the balcony, which it often does because I've got an amazing view of the city. But that's beside the point. So the questions are, can you get her to a place where sex is realistically possible? That comes into the logistical questions and you having that place prepared. Escalation answers the second question. Have you got her at least somewhat turned on? If you've got her at least somewhat turned on and you're in a place where sex is realistically possible, the sex will happen. Now, not really sure, you're at the bar, you're not sure if it's time to make the pull, it's not time to grab her by the hand and get her out of the bar, just fucking try it anyways. The worst thing that can happen is you misread things and you're a little premature. That doesn't mean that you can't try again later. And that's kind of the beauty of kind of being known as the sexual and flirtatious guy is I could say some of the most fucked up, disgusting, dirty things to girls, and if I ever go a little bit too far or I try to push things too far, all I have to do is say, listen, I'm sorry, I'm just a guy. I sometimes say the stupid shit when I'm flirting with a girl that I think is really attractive. You forgive me? And they always do. So, if you go too far, apologize for it. Then try again later. And odds are the next time she'll go for it. A lot of the times when you are going for those, you're trying to pull her home or maybe you have her back home and she's resisting a little bit. A lot of the time she just feels like she has to put that resistance up just so that she knows that she can say no. Not that she necessarily wants to say no, but just so that she can. Once she knows that she's free to say no, that's when she's free to say yes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, a little bit of a diversion in the sense that you mentioned how you should keep your place clean and be ready for the a possibility of bringing them back. Strange thing is about women is that it's always the opposite. For example, they spend so much time getting themselves clean and ready and everything, and often, I find it's often the complete opposite when you have a lot of success. Like when you may be at your dirtiest, when you're smelliest, and your place could be a total disaster, and that happens to be the time you're bringing her back, and it's like as if they want to, that they need to be doing something bad, and the fact that you're not clean and that your place is not nice. It's just like you talked in one of your recent blogs about how one of the serial killer Ted Bundy had 100 love letters sent to him while he's on death row. It's like it seems like it's always the opposite that attracts a lot of these women. They it's like they're not comfortable on a politically correct manner of having a sexual adventure. And so this is like just one of the thoughts I thought I would throw at you, see what your thought of that was.
You're actually correct. And when I'm thinking back on some of my more sordid past and some of my more fucked up hookups, I can remember at one point I was in a really low point in my life. Luckily, I was still, I could get laid like a son of a bitch, but financially I was fucked at one point. And I was actually, strangely enough, living on living in my friend's crappy apartment. He had like a duplex, and the other half of the duplex was a giant dirt pit, and then there was a dirty other half of the apartment. And I was sleeping in his living room on one of those, those like memory foam things that you put on top of a bed to make it more comfortable. Well, all I had was that little memory foam, and it would be on the floor. And I called it my killer pad. I would tell girls I have a killer pad. No joke. Killer pad, because kills the fuck out of my back, this pad that I'm sleeping on. And one of the hottest girls that I ever hooked up with, she was a Playboy Cyber Club girl, just gorgeous, massive tits, tight bottom, skinny waist, beautiful. Where did I bang her? On the killer pad. So, I mean, I'm not saying that your logistics have to always be perfect. I'm not saying that you have to live in a mansion. I'm not saying that you have to always have to have all of the dishes washed in the sink and whatnot. That's not always the case, but I do know that on some certain psychological levels that it's going to be that much more effortless and more comfortable for you to bring girls back when at least it's set up and ready to go. But yeah, don't get me wrong. Girls have that naughty side, and there's that bad boy image that they're attracted to for a reason. What that biological reason is, I don't know. But women are attracted to that dangerous, I mean, I'm thinking even back when I'm working in one of quite possibly the sleaziest jobs I've ever had. I am a strip club manager. That's, about as sleazy as it gets, I guess. But even with, like, I'm talking virginal type girls, that thought of being with the guy who is directing 150 different naked girls a night would really get them turned on. And I'm talking like really religious type girls. That would be exciting to them because I would be that guy.
Yeah, it's interesting what works and what doesn't sometimes. But that's but let's get back a little bit to I guess the fundamentals here. And you'd mentioned more that you were talking of seduction as being a skill as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to developing confidence. But I mean, I'm assuming there was a mindset change in yourself in order
Yeah, I think
to get where you are.
here's the way that I look at it. I look at it the same as any other skill that you can have. Um, if you were to put me in front of a really attractive girl, I will shine. I will do things that will shock and amaze most guys. I do it all the time. Most of my friends are a lot more handsome than I am, and I'm just the fat schlubby dude. They think until we're out and about, and I'm interacting with the girls, and they're sitting back with their good looks and their fat bank accounts that I have neither of, and going, what the fuck? Um, but you put me on a tightrope, or you put me in a high building, even though I'm living in this penthouse, I can't even walk to the balcony sometimes because I get terrified. I just shrink. Or, I could have all the skills in the world, all the confidence in the world, and you tell me to go have a conversation with somebody in Esperanto. I don't care how confident I am, whatever that word confidence means, I'm going to fumble and falter because I don't speak Esperanto. I never will. I'm never going to study it. And in fact, I don't know anybody who actually does speak that language. Maybe there might be 10 people, but it's made up. I kind of liken seduction more to learning how to play an instrument. If you were to hand a guitar to somebody who's never touched a guitar and say, here, play Stairway to Heaven, they would go, I don't know, put my fingers here. They wouldn't know what to do. But if they were to practice, maybe they practice some chords first or practice some scales first. They'd start figuring out, all right, well, this is the string I pluck. This is where I put my finger here. Eventually, as they do that more and more and they do more reps of it, they will become more and more confident, quote unquote, in their abilities to play Stairway to Heaven. The same goes with seduction. As you go and practice the fundamental skills it takes to get women sexually aroused, to get them excited, to get them really wanting to hook up with you, the more quote-unquote confidence will come to you. It doesn't go the other way around. I've never met a person that just sat in their room or looked in a mirror and said, you know, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and god damn it, women want to fuck the living shit out of me. I've never met a guy that actually got good with women by going that way and then going out to the bar. They got good by going out and practicing fundamental skills and getting better at it. And the better they got at it, the more that they backwards kind of got that confidence. So it's kind of more of a natural byproduct of having a tangible skill, an actual skill in something. Does that make sense? Does that distinction make sense? Because I know that there's a lot of people out there peddling their wares of saying that you can become confident first, and then your actions or your abilities will follow. And I just say, no, it goes the other way around. You get the abilities, then the confidence will follow.
Well, it's the old expression of competence breeds confidence.
There you go.
That certainly understandable. Just a lot of times I'm sure that you come across students that have this difficulty to even start the conversation with the woman, and then to maintain enough of their composure to even ask the 5 questions and things like this. This is so I guess that leads me to another question which I wanted to talk to you about was your experiences as a coach and teaching. Things like that just described it, how you deal with that, and I guess the big question that I'd like you to address ultimately is, what have you learned about teaching as you've done it over the years? What has become an insight that perhaps you feel has been critical to helping guys become more successful?
Actually, the biggest thing that I've found that has made guys more successful more quickly, and I don't do live boot camps anymore. I kind of wish I did, but I'm living in a situation where it's just no longer very likely. I no longer live in the U.S. anymore. God bless the USA, but I haven't lived there in 5 years. So it's made doing live trainings a lot more difficult. But the reason that when I kind of semi-retired from doing live trainings, the reason that I could take, after over, I think I did 163 different boot camps, and at the end of that career, 83% of them had gotten laid on the boot camp. The reason that I was able to instill such massive change in these guys is for a couple reasons. One, we were practicing in consequence-free environments where if you fucked it up with one girl, you could always walk on to the next girl and try again. A lot of guys are trying to master this skill in situations where it's less than consequence-free. They read the game or they read the latest pickup manual, and the first thought that goes through their mind is, I'm going to go use this on that girl that I'm so far in the friend zone with, or I'm going to use this on my social circle, and the next thing they know, nobody wants to invite them to any more parties. They never get invited to dinner anymore. They've creeped out everybody in their social circle. Nobody wants to hang out with them because they didn't get calibrated before they were actually able to use this stuff properly. So where do you practice? You practice where the girls are, where it's consequence-free, where nothing's going to happen if you fuck it up, and you will early on. Trust me, you will, and I fucked it up more times than probably anyone. That's how I was actually able to get good, is that fucking up is actually a good thing. What I'm talking about is doing this in bars and clubs. It's the best place to get good. I don't care if you like bars and clubs or not. I am no stranger to the cocktail. I cut my teeth working in bars, clubs, and all that. I still don't really like bars and clubs, but it's the best place to practice. So go to a place where there's going to be plenty of girls. Doesn't matter if you fuck it up. If you fuck it up with one girl, you just move on to the next one. That's the first tenet. It's consequence-free. The second thing is that you focus on certain things that you're working on, because almost every guy that picks up a pickup guide wants to master every one of the 50 different principles in the book all at once. And trust me, that's a recipe for disaster, because you're never going to be able to handle 50 things all at once. You might be able to handle 1 to 3 things at once. So, what I would have each of my students do, depending on where they were in their abilities, is they would write on the back of I used to give them index cards. That's how old school I am with this shit. Index cards, I guess you could use Evernote now, but give them index cards, the 3 things that you're working on tonight. Um, 2 of them would be skills that I wanted them to be practicing, and the third one is always the same. And this should be the third one for everyone. The modus operandi, the prime objective for everyone: get laid. That is your ultimate one. And I don't care how you do it. I don't care what methods that you take. I don't care if you just don't know where to take the interaction next. It's kind of in my mentality, or the way I look at it, is the cart before the horse. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to constantly be going for that lay, even if I'm out of stuff to say, I'm out of stuff to do, I don't know what to do, but that's my goal. That's on my little note card of the 3 things that I'm doing tonight. Get laid. I'll make it happen somehow. And just having that on your list of things to do helps. But then just having 2 things. Work on 2 things. You don't have to be a master of every different obscure seduction technique to get laid more than the average guy. If you are good, just a couple of the different ways to escalate, you're going to be 100 times better than most guys, because most guys are terrible at all ways to do it. So realize that you only have to work on a few things at a time. And if you work on a few things at a time, you get pretty good at that, then you can work on something else. And then there's the final thing, and this is kind of my coup de grace way that really made guys exponentially better really quickly. It's kind of my proprietary secret sauce. I don't even like to share that this is how I do it, but I'll do it now because, hey, this is fun. Might as well tell them. Record everything that you do. Think of every major sports team. What do? They record the game, and the next day after all of the best teams, they do this, or good fighters, they go and analyze exactly what they did right in the game, exactly where they fucked it up in the match. This is where one fighter started wobbling a little too much. This is where you started being a little bit too aggressive on the passing game when it wasn't working. You really want to be able to go through that footage of you interacting with women. And this was actually the secret sauce that got me good, is I started recording myself. And it was painful. It was painful and embarrassing to listen to and watch at first. And at the same time, it was what actually was able to propel me into real success. I was actually able to see all of the stupid mistakes I was making all night that I wasn't even aware of, but when I saw it on camera, I kind of wanted to hold my head in shame. I was even coaching at the time that I started doing this. I'm like, holy shit, I tell guys all the time not to do this. There I am doing it. God damn it. The second you see that, though, makes it that much easier. Okay, that's gone. It's so easy once you actually see yourself doing it to root that bad habit out. Now, on the flip side of that is you're going to see a lot of things that you're actually doing right. You're going to see a lot of things that, wow, I am actually really good at touching women in just the right way that gets them excited. I need to do more of that. So between those 3 things was what was able to make guys improve really quickly over the course of 3 nights. Most guys were getting laid. And, I mean, if a guy wanted to do that by himself, or if you wanted to hire me to do it with him, with my instruction, that's no longer possible, really, unless they really want to fork out some money. But you could do this yourself. And in fact, soon enough, I'm going to be giving an opportunity for guys to have access to the exact same tools I use to record myself and to really kind of focus in on what I was doing right and wrong, and make it available to guys for free. It's going to be on my website soon enough. I'm not trying to plug or promote anything, but look for that soon. And I hope that answered your question. It was kind of
Yeah,
a long one.
that was a good one. I guess another question I'm curious about is, your focus is very much on the same night lays and
Hmm.
taking them home right away. And there's there's certainly people out there with there's a couple of things that I want to talk about on that direction. But one of the things is that there's definitely people out there with the strong belief that if you get them ready for the same night lay and then you don't do them, you really consolidate your power with them and have a lot better longer term prospects with them if you want that by I guess efficiently and effectively putting them off. When you get them to the point where they're expecting it and they're and they are disappointed that you don't close on them, and that you show this kind of self control that they don't find from other guys. Um, that was kind of I guess I'm curious your thoughts on that.
I see the point that they're going after, and yet at the same time, I could think of no greater insult to a woman who's there, ready, excited. She wants to jump your bones, and then all of a sudden you're like, nah, I don't feel it anymore. Um, that's really insulting to a girl. That'd be like you walking up to a girl and saying hello, and she says, "Fuck off, douchebag." So, I mean, on the one hand, I could see how that could be possible, where you get her excited, and yes, it gets her more like, thinking about the future. But at the same time, if she was like ready to go and you didn't take action on it, women tend to open these windows of opportunity for you to escalate on them, for you to take it to the next level, for you to stick it in them in this case. When you don't take them up on that, it feels exactly like I was just saying. It's insulting. It feels horrible to them. Here they are opening themselves up to you, and you just kind of smack it away.
I think we're a little bit on a different level on what I'm aiming at because
Okay.
uh, it's not like I don't feel like it anymore. It's not like that. It's more that you're in control and that
Mm-hmm.
you're definitely interested in having sex with them, but you're not going to do it tonight. You just don't do it on the first night. She's still a bit of a stranger to you or something like that, and you're just showing her that you're the man and that you're in control and that it's going to happen when you want it to happen, and that's a different sort of approach more than I don't feel like it and I'm just toying with you. It's not on that basis.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that's one way to do it. I'm curious the guy who really doesn't want to do it when he can do it. I guess if that is, if you're not in the mood that night and you want to do it later, I guess do it later. There's nothing wrong with that. I haven't met too many guys that legitimately didn't want to strike while the iron was hot, if you know what I mean. But I guess if you do want to do it later, sure, that's fine. Now, I can also see for logistical reasons why this might also be like a good thing. Maybe you do want to hook up with her that night, but for whatever reason, maybe you've got some family visiting, so you can't take her back to your place. I could see that being okay. Like, listen, I got family back, but let's continue this later. But if it's really just to use it as just a strategy, it seems kind of silly. No offense, it just seems why do that when you could hook up with her? And I know a lot of people think, well, if I hook up with her on the first night, she's not going to be relationship material. She's not going to be. She's just going to think it's going to be a one night stand. But I can say this: that almost every one of my long term relationships every one of them has started from a one night stand, or I guess a same night lay. They've all started there. Um, Now, all of the ones that were kind of just, uh, quote unquote one night stand, or the ones that didn't go as planned, those are the ones that I usually put things off. And even when I wanted to pursue more of a relationship type thing, the longer the sex was put off, the less likely it was that we were actually going to end up in a relationship. Not to say that I haven't had a lot of one night stands as well. That those were fun as well, and those were pretty much just part and parcel of living in Las Vegas. But I found that if you want to have a relationship, that's like the big objection. One of the best ways to make sure that happens is to hook up with her as quickly as possible because you get all of that out of the way. You get all of, you already know that you're comfortable with this person, that you could be sexual, that you could express that side of yourself with her, and she can do the same with you. Getting that out of the way is liberating, and relationships naturally flow from that as well. So I don't know if that's a tangent, but it's kind of the way I look at it.
What are your comments on relationships? I guess is given that the direction of most of everything you talk about is sort of get it done and get it done now.
Relationships are awesome, and if that's what you're going for, going the route that I teach is definitely, I still think, the best way to go about a relationship. I've been in lots of relationships. I've been in relationships recently that were over the span of 4 or 5 years that were amazing and satisfying and gratifying and were exactly what I was looking for. Did they start with a same night lay? Yes, they did. Um, it all depends on what you're looking for, but the methodology behind it all is pretty much always the same. Um, I guess I didn't really invent hooking up like I kind of mentioned before. I just kind of discovered what makes that happen, what makes it easier to happen. So whether a guy is looking just to have a whole string of one night stands, have multiple girlfriends that he can have on speed dial, whether he wants to have threesomes, all that stuff, or whether he wants to settle down, find the love of his life, find a hot girlfriend, find a wife that every one of his friends are going to be jealous of, the same path is going to be the path that I prescribe is going to be the best path to get to any of those goals. At least that's the way that I look at it.
Okay. Um, you mentioned earlier that you had managed strip clubs.
Yes.
What have you learned about women from that? That's maybe something that I'd like to find out.
Oh, I mean, you will learn a lot about women when you're around that many of them. Now, is it a representative sample of most women? No. A lot of the women that I was working with were, how do we put it, damaged goods. But not to say that they all were, but a lot of them were not quite there. But at the same time, I think it was working in strip clubs and working in just normal bars that I really realized. Um, well, let's back up. I grew up in a very, very religious household. I grew up thinking that women hated sex, that it was something that they would do for procreation and to please their husband, I guess, but it was never something that they actually enjoyed. It wasn't until I was deep in the trenches of working in high-end bars, clubs, strip clubs, working with strippers, that I really realized how much more, I think more, women crave sex than men do. And I know most guys listening to this are like, no, I've got a boner 24/7. I'm constantly horny. For every reason you have that drives you to want to hook up with a really, really hot woman, she has a similar reason to want to hook up with you. Yes, she might have more societal pressures on her to not act on those urges, but all of those pressures that are put on her not to act on it can be used in your favor to get her to work on it, or to work for you to make that interaction happen, for that sex to happen. Women are just as sexual as men, probably more. That's kind of the big main lesson that I learned from working around so many women.
Well, what I guess I'm curious on like what sort of brought you to those realizations. More, I think we all have heard that, repeatedly that women want sex more than men, but meanwhile, it's a whole process that we go through with things like the 5 questions and with the escalation and the closing. Is a whole series of things that we've developed in order to get them to do what they already want in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very good at not necessarily letting us know where their head's at, and
Well, they don't
even
want to
though
reveal their cards early.
right, they play their cards much better than we do. That's for
Yeah, we're
sure.
terrible at it. Um, and there's a lot more societal pressures on them to not really, it's the whole Madonna whore complex problem where a man is a stud if he hooks up with a lot of women, and a woman's a fucking whore if she hooks up with a lot of dudes. There's a lot of that going on that really sucks, and it gets in the way of basically men and women in having more happiness and more joy, more sexual satisfaction. But there is a lot of that going on behind the scenes. No woman wants to feel like she's, a second-class citizen because she enjoys sex, even though she enjoys sex. She's a woman. She has those same desires as anyone else. It's just basically the way that I look at seduction, and if I were to define seduction, here's what it is. Here's the definition of seduction. Seduction is the art of giving a woman permission to do the things that she already wants to do anyway. You're not really trying to convince a girl to do something that she doesn't want to do. Here's a way that I like to look at it. You can never seduce a woman into eating dog shit, but you could seduce her into eating cheesecake. Most guys go around interacting with women acting almost like they're offering her dog shit to eat, whereas I go around, I've got a big plate of cheesecake. Would you like some? It's here for the taking. Seduction is that way. You are offering them the cheesecake where they could do it in a judgment-free zone. Nobody has to know that she snuck a couple bites of the cheesecake, the forbidden cheesecake that's so naughty, so decadent, so dirty, but she wants that. So you give her the permission to taste of it, to partake of it, and things happen.
Well, let's take it from the from after you've had your success for the night. Let's assume there's sort of two directions. One is that you don't want to see her again. I wonder how you what you do in that circumstance. How do you gracefully exit? And and then the other one is if you do want to see her again. Some people have a call it a script that they will run. They'll read them the riot act where, for example, they may let them know they date other women and, how they set up the frame for the ongoing experience. So I'm just curious about those two thoughts when you're with the woman after you finished with her the first night.
Yeah, if it comes up on the first night, I mean, usually this is something that doesn't even really come up till later. I don't really know where things are going. Maybe it's just going to be a one-night stand. Well, then I can just taper off the conversation. Hell, half the first the one-night stands, I didn't even have her name or number. We just were horny and we hooked up. But if there is ongoing communication with her, if I want to, kind of cut things off, I just kind of taper the communication off. And women are doing the same kind of thing. Like, they hook up with guys all the time that they had fun that night, but maybe they also want to explore other avenues. Now, if it does get to the point where you're seeing this girl, you're seeing her every once in a while, and she asks those dreaded questions, what are we, what is this that we're doing? This isn't something that I came up with. This is something my good old partner in crime at Same Night Seduction, Epic, came up with, but he calls it the box speech. And just to kind of summarize, basically what he does is, I look at relationships as kind of a box, and the fun thing about boxes is you never know what's inside it. You never know what you can put inside it. And so, I could put this relationship in this box and put a label on it and a bow that says that it's going to be a relationship, or I could put it in here and say that we're just going to be friends with benefits, or I can just say that we are just going to talk to each other every now and again and have mad passionate sex once a year. But I don't know exactly what box to put you in, and I'd rather not put you in a box. So I'd rather things just happen naturally. Doesn't that make much more sense? And she'll say, yeah, it does make much more sense, because then it can be naturally put into the box that it was supposed to be in, rather than us arbitrarily putting it into a box that maybe it doesn't belong in, or maybe it's not going to be what makes the most sense. And that's kind of how he does it until he figures out exactly, do I want to be in a relationship with this girl? Do I want to have her as a booty call? Do I want to have her be somebody that I can have potential threesomes with? Is it somebody that I just, let's just be friends now? All of those things are possible so long as you set them up to be that way.
Okay, that's very interesting. I think we've covered a good bit of territory here, and I think what I'd like to do now is to have you tell a little bit about, I guess, your website, your coaching, whatever you're doing at the moment. I know you mentioned you don't do the live trainings anymore, but I'm sure you have products and stuff. Why don't you tell people how they can learn more from you?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad that you brought this up because I want to thank everybody that's been on this call or on this podcast or who's been listening all the way up to this point and listen to me yammer on about stuff. And as my way of saying thank you for doing that, I want to offer two gifts. First off, I want to offer a guide that will tell you a secret line that gets women dripping wet. I use it all the time, and instantly she starts feeling that sexual tingling between her legs. All you got to do is go to samenightseduction.com/cliffslist, and you can get that guide. But that's not all, because once you enter your email list, I'm going to send you a coupon code to get my best-selling program, the program that I sell more than any other program out there. I'm going to give it to you for free, just because you have been on this call or you've been listening to this. And you'll get that in the next email. And it's my program called Secret Sexual Touch Techniques. And what this program is everything that you need to know about how to touch women in ways that get them turned on. Have you ever been to a bar, club, too loud to talk, too loud to really understand what she's saying? So you get frustrated, you get angry, and you leave. Well, you don't need to actually be talking to her if you know how to touch her in ways that get her excited, get her turned on, get her aroused. It's kind of like this little loophole that I've discovered on being able to sexually escalate on women, even if you can't really say anything to her. And it's actually something that was partially developed because I, for a while, lived in a country that I didn't even speak the goddamn language. So I was still able to get women into bed using these secret sexual touch techniques without speaking the language. I normally charge for that, but for all the listeners of this program, I'm going to give that to you for free. I'll just give you a coupon code. You can go and get it for free. Otherwise, you can buy it on my site, Same Night Seduction. But you'd be smarter just to go to samenightseduction.com/cliffslist, and I will get you set up with both of those gifts.
Well, that's very generous of you, and I greatly appreciate the time you've taken today to tell about what you do and how you do it. And I'm hoping we'll do another one of these pretty soon. It was really enlightening and interesting.
I'd be more than delighted to do that. So anytime you want, you can count on me to show up and do one of these again. I'm loving doing stuff like this.
Sounds great. All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, talk to you later.